Welcome back to part 2 of my series, I guess, on burnout. Can 2 videos be a series? Oh no. I thought this was going to be an easier video to do because it's all about the things that I did and the things that we can actually do, instead of just thinking constantly about all the stuff that's hard. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes it's a lot, and we really, I feel like this is the fun part, which is when we get to actually look at our lives and take them apart so that we can actually do something different to help ourselves in what is really probably one of the most difficult things to face as a neurodivergent person. When I say neurodivergent, I'm talking about ADHD and autistic primarily. I do have other neurodivergencies, but these two are the big ones for me. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm Amber. I am 42. Identify mostly with neuroqueer. My pronouns are she, they. I got my dual diagnosis of ADHD and autistic at the age of 39. I have been managing and trying to cope with burnout for the last 3 years. 3 years. While simultaneously being a neurodivergent parent, parenting my neurodivergent children, and coping with all of the impact that this burnout has had on my marriage, on my perceptions of the world, on my perceptions of myself, on the perceptions of my family and the people who raised me. All of it just kind of blew apart. So this is my story of the things that I did, realized, worked on, because honestly, I really wish that this kind of video had existed when everything started to make absolutely no sense. I did have help from many different areas, and I will share those resources with you as well. But let's get into it because learning is fun. Perfection is not going to be the goal. I'm very nervous about the idea of being perceived as an expert, someone who can give you all of the answers so that you can make your life perfect and wonderful. And I get very suspicious of people who can promise that kind of thing. There's no way that can happen with the way that everything is. I get that whole, but it's not gonna actually make everything great. And I think we need to change our minds about that a bit. Our goal here is not to achieve idealistic levels of security, safety, coping, management, because I just don't think it's realistic, again, given everything. But that doesn't mean that trying doesn't matter. Trying maybe to get a little bit less uncomfortable, trying maybe to come to terms with this a little bit. So like I say in all of my videos, if this helps you at all, if it resonates with you all, I would love to hear about it. And I'm glad. If it doesn't, and you're like, that's totally not me, that would never work, I don't want to try that, that's totally cool too. I'm PDA, I understand. I'm not going to demand anything from you. You don't need to take any of this information and use it at all. It may not even be particularly helpful. Maybe my experience isn't that helpful to other people, which is part of the reason why I was like, why even bother? But I'm gonna do it anyway because I feel like it's important to have that information out there. It has been a lot of trying to figure out something that isn't really actually established at all. There is no manual. Alright, as long as we know I'm not an expert, I'm telling you my experience, then we can proceed. So what is it? What exactly happened? Burnout kind of works like this, and a lot of this is informed by models and understandings that we have of the nervous system and the vagus nerve and the stress response and the stress cycle and our capacity to manage and handle stress, which is interesting because before I started taking a class with Trauma Geek and Janae, who I will link in the description because you really ought to go check all of that out. It's great. I had really sort of started to feel this way myself. I was like, what's going on? I can't actually handle stress anymore the way that I used to. So essentially, I view it like this. If you're ADHD, autistic, combination of those two especially, you have a tremendous amount of synapses. In fact, scientifically speaking, I believe that we have more than a neurotypical brain. We have a lot. And again, it's probably a spectrum and all of that stuff. But what they have told us is that we have more. Which means that because you have more, you perceive and pick up on stressors more. You have more sensitivities. You are picking up on way more in your environment all the time. And your brain is then going to manage that somehow. It's a lot to manage. It takes a lot of energy to manage. And that means that you are handling and managing and coping with stress far more often because your neuroception is picking up on more stuff all the time. Neuroception being the part of our brain that literally does that. It picks up on everything. And it's doing that, it's gathering that data in order to perceive danger. And our bodies tend to pick up on danger more often. On top of that, trauma that is stored in the body comes from not being safe enough within spaces to be able to express yourself authentically to get through the stress response, which is basically all of society. That means that you're probably also managing and dealing with and using energy to carry all the trauma and the masking, i.e. repressing and shutting down and dissociating so that you do not show up in a way that society dislikes, showing the fact that you're perceiving all of this danger and that it is actually having an impact on your body. So, if you have been living like your whole life working overtime to manage more information, more stress, more perceptions of danger. Also, if you are not diagnosed and so therefore you are trying to live an entirely different lifestyle that actually isn't who you are at all, you're most likely not going to have any tools that are actually effective for you because most likely most of them were things that people told you not to do, for quite frankly, like stimming, moving around, sensory input, hugging stuffies, comfort items, a lot of the things that once you realize that you are neurodivergent, ADHD, autistic, that you can then incorporate back in, which we will talk about later. But if you don't have those, if you don't have coping strategies that actually work, and your only coping strategy is like repression, yeah, that's not going to go well for you because you are constantly dealing with stress and there's nothing to take it down. Eventually, you will hit a place where you no longer have the energy to sustain the coping strategies and mechanisms that you've used in order to be able to manage everything. And that's when you hit full-blown burnout. That is the point of no return or whatever, I don't know. the big one, I guess is what I would call it, where body basically says, well, we can't now. The battery is not replenishable very quickly, very easily. You lose your capacity to cope, to go through the stress response, and to get onto the other side of that to be all right. And a lot of this comes from the fact that the environment itself is actually not particularly supportive or comfortable for us. It provides a lot of input that, frankly, I think a lot of the times isn't even that necessary. I honestly, personally believe that if we accommodated people with disabilities, then everyone would benefit. In fact, whatever, I have like a whole thing about that. I'm not going to get into it right now, but like anyway, once I had the nervous system aspect of it, something really clicked in me. And then I could put down all the weight and the burden that we place on people who are not well to take full responsibility for everything that's going on with them, because the environment matters so much. And that's what we're going to talk about next. It's not your fault. Everything is a lot for everybody, but for us especially, because we are constantly, I don't know, it's pinging us all the time. On top of it, I feel like it's actually increasing in our world, the stressors and all of that. So once you understand that, then you can start to look at the things that you actually can do something about. I've decided I'm going to group all of this stuff and do like one segment at a time, which is a way for me to accommodate myself so I don't get overstimulated and overwhelmed by all of the information that I want to convey. Today we're going to talk about changing the environment, which was a big one. I think that was one of the big initial ones, aside from just sleeping and resting a lot. I actually didn't start out by trying to regulate or figuring out how to regulate. That was kind of a failed attempt, honestly. Why I think that is because I was in such a state of survival mode. I needed to reduce the stressors and sensory input in my environment first in order to get even enough space to be able to calm down enough to regulate. So that's where I started first. I started out with my environment. I went through all the sensory, like, sights, smell, taste, touch, all of that stuff. And I slowly started to check in with myself, like, all the time, to notice what was uncomfortable. I started noticing that and noticing the patterns. That's where your pattern recognition honestly can serve you so well, which is great. If you have really good pattern recognition, then this kind of stuff ends up being kind of fun. It's like, oh, okay, why does that bother me? What is it about that thing? And then when you know that, you can be like, okay, so then how can I alter this in a way that doesn't do that for me anymore? And I think that's where the real magic happens, like for real. And you can start applying that to multiple other aspects of your life and how you feel about things. But like primarily for the environmental part, it's great. It's great if you can start to pick apart all those things. I was essentially learning again for the first time, maybe, actually. Yeah, no, for the first time, what actually worked for me. And like finding the things that you don't need other people's permission to change is like gold. It's absolute gold. There's so many perceptions we have about how things need to be done that actually don't really need to be done that way. And if you find another way that's like so much better for you, then that's a win. And by all means do it. Like even really basic tiny things. I was like, I don't like wearing those kinds of shoes anymore. I'm just going to wear more comfortable things. I mostly wear slippers now. I get the kinds, I don't know, that have like the faux fur trim on them or whatever, and they're nice and soft in the winter. And then during the summer, I just wear sandals. I like to view all of the input like kind of like a Jenga stack. I personally do not have the capacity to habituate to all of my input the way that other people might be able to. And I guess that's because of all the synapses, right? Like we also don't just like get used to it. I think there's that component too. So if you're wearing something uncomfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to stop being uncomfortable. You might get distracted from that discomfort, but that's not the same thing as not feeling it. And then that just becomes more weight that you're carrying all the time. That's why it's so important in any little way you possibly can to eliminate discomfort. Like you don't have to wear scratchy clothes. Like I don't know why they exist at all. I don't buy and wear fancy stuff. I wear comfortable things. And if they don't feel good, I'm not gonna torture myself the whole day. So that became a requirement of mine. It's like I'm gonna wear something. It can't be adding to the weight because right now I need to take out of my Jenga stack. The Jenga stack, to me, is sort of like everything that's piled up that you're managing and carrying all day. And if that Jenga stack gets too high, that's where we end up in the red zone. That's where we end up in this place of deep overwhelm and distress that's much harder for us to come down from. There's a lot of times these internalized belief systems we have where we don't even realize that like at one point someone told us it has to be done like this. And we're like, but does it? So yes, I understand that it like maybe out in broader society, asking that question all the time is probably really annoying to people, but you're trying to construct your life now based upon who you are, who you actually are, and what you actually need, and what your body is okay with. And that's not a crime. Like, it's not bad. So, and again, we're talking about realm of control, right? So you may not be able to change externally how other people want to do things or how loud they want their music or whatever, but we can focus as much as we can on what we can control within our own lives, within our own environments, in places where we can. Yes, part of our advocacy work has to be, everybody, not just disabled people, has to be changing the environments and the structures and everything so that they can be more accommodating to everybody. But that is a much slower and longer, project. You gotta start somewhere. And some of the greatest change you can make is in your own life, internally, for yourself. I feel like it's really important to start from the inside and to work your way out. So reduce your Jenga pieces, or some people like to call them forks in the side, or if you're talking about spoon theory, reduce the amount of spoons you're using, the amount of input, whatever you want to call it. I know that for me, one of the biggest things that I did for myself was get the noise canceling headphones. And I'll be honest, I struggled for about a year with the cheaper pairs. And finally invested in a pair of Bose. And these allow me to control the noise canceling. I understand that it's not always an option for everybody, and not everybody has the same level of sound sensitivity that I do. I have very, very high sound sensitivity as well as auditory processing issues. I wish that these things were really actually considered a disability aid and provided to people. Even when I started wearing the loop earbuds, even when I put those in for the first time, and I realized that I could actually take away some of the noise input, that was huge for me. I cried. I realized that most people were not experiencing the levels of distress in their body that I was to sounds. I just assumed, because everyone told me that parenting is hard, life is hard, you just have to deal with it. I didn't realize that actually what people consider dealing with it is vastly impacted by how much their bodies are perceiving and how much how sensitive they actually are. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have people in this world telling other people what their level of sensitivity is and what their experience should be based upon their own internal experiences of things. At the end of the day, if something is big to someone, it's big to them. If their body is having that kind of reaction, that's happening whether you want it to or not. I was surprised because a lot of the things that I needed to change, then I I had to go out a rung, I guess, on the realm of control, because I have a family and I have children and I have a husband. So then I had to go out, into that and be like, hey, is this okay with you if we change this thing? And really explain why I really needed that. And then, get them on board as well. But what was interesting for me is that as I was doing that, as I was slowly changing things in my environment, it was actually benefiting them as well. And it's not always, it's usually not actually the things that are the most expensive. I just don't watch TV that much. And I feel so much better. We don't use the big light, we use lamps, and the lighting is so nice at night that it's actually more calming of an environment for everybody. We don't spend a lot of money now on foods that no one's ever really going to want to eat anyway. We are learning about it's actually really great because we're learning about boundaries around noise and sound and stuff like that. Because, there are 4 people in this house and we all have sensory needs. And so a bonus and a benefit of that is that we are learning how to better navigate the needs of multiple people at one time. I just think it's really interesting how often the accommodations that we land on tend to be really great for everybody too, which supports the theory I was talking about earlier, because we have more stuffies and we have more sensory items and we have all of these, positive things, which is something else you can do in your environment, is bring in positive sensory things for yourself. We have heat blankets, we have fuzzy blankets, we have, stuffies. We even just got a weighted stuffy, which is kind of amazing, like hugs you, like that's really nice. Everybody in the family is benefiting from that. We have a calm corner with like a projector, and like it's just a crash pad with all of the stuffed animals there, and that benefits everybody. It's a space where people can go to like get a little more quiet and to calm down if they want. So I have a list here of all of the sensory things, and I'm just going to go through them and kind of give you some examples of things that we did, that we changed in our lives that have helped us. In terms of sight, like I don't watch TV. I don't actually watch a lot of overstimulating stuff. In fact, I greatly reduced the amount of social media I consume and scrolling and stuff, because honestly, it's just too overwhelming. So I try to keep that to a minimum. I haven't erased it entirely, but I keep it to a minimum. I don't really watch a lot of television, honestly, because a lot of it is just way too overwhelming. Every once in a while, I will watch something like a movie or whatever, but I actually just really reduced a lot of the screen time that I had. Sound, obviously, getting the headphones helps a lot. This controls my environment for me, but I also can actually like hear things. So the things that I am watching, I primarily use the Bluetooth on here to funnel the sound directly through my headphones. And one of the positive sounds that I put in that I listen to a lot is binaural beats. I tend to like the alpha waves, which is really interesting because I don't know if that's the one that you're supposed to activate people. I don't know. Everybody's different, and we all respond to different things. So I use that a lot for calming and for meditation and a lot of other things that we will talk about in a different section of this video. In terms of smell, like I said, we have an outdoor toaster now. We have a toaster that lives on our back porch, and like it's a covered porch, so it doesn't get wet or anything, and it's doing just fine. And we do most of our toasting out there because that smell just got to be too intense, or because that smell is too intense for me. I started using products that don't have any perfumes in them. For real, like if it has a perfume, I really can't handle it. So it's not even worth it for me anymore. I've learned that lesson way too many times. Just like, I'm not advertising or anything, but like I use the Prose shampoo and like curl cream products purely because they have an unscented option. You don't have to have the perfume. It's great. In terms of taste, like we, as a family, we eat what we want to eat. And that's all I have to say about that. Like, we're not starving. We're doing great. Our health is good. For touch, changed what I wear. I don't do skinny jeans anymore. I'm done. And for, it looks like I put down sound twice, so it must have mattered a lot. It's not easy when some of the people in your family are sensory seeking, but we have done a decent job of being able to like sort of have different zones where that can happen, where other people can go to a room or something or elsewhere, or we, get to a point where we're like, okay, like, please, like, can we have like some quiet time, please? Or can you take the kids out to the park, please? Thank you, or whatever. But primarily, these help me a lot with a lot of the unexpected sounds and stuff like that. And so that's just like some examples. Obviously, there's probably way more that I can't really remember right now. But like, you really can overhaul this in spaces where like you don't have to worry about the external world. So why not use that to your advantage? So as I'm editing this, I'm realizing that I also want to talk briefly about other kinds of input besides the senses, because I think social input is huge for us. Obviously, that doesn't apply to everybody, but like for me, social input was huge. It takes a lot out of me to do it, and so I reduced that like almost entirely. I was mostly just interacting with my family, my partner, and then any like mandatory appointments that I had to do. There were a couple of times where I tried going to like social commitments, and I was just not okay. Like it just like totally threw me out. So any social media spaces that weren't safe enough for me, where I'd be providing a lot of masking or doing anything like that, took them out of my life. I had to. It was really stressful to keep putting in significant amounts of work. You know, some of it may not have necessarily been necessary, but like, you know, I'm still sorting all of that out. You know, like my relationship with socializing had to change too, and I'm still figuring that one out. But just so you know, like it's okay to like pull back a little bit, and you might have to. You might really have to, actually, quite a lot. And yes, it's a bit lonely, so like I would not suggest completely isolating yourself. A lot of us don't have a lot of close connections in our lives to begin with, which that can be really hard because we tend to like cling on to a lot of connections because of that reason. Take out as much as you possibly can if it's really dragging you down and really stressful and like just doesn't feel particularly healthy to you. Whew, all right, that was a lot of information. I'm gonna stop here. The next video will be the next part in the series. I guess it is a series. Welcome to the series on burnout and what you might actually be able to do about it. Also, drop a comment below if you want to share any of the hacks and stuff like that that have helped you, that have helped you control your environment and or change it for the better for you as a neurodivergent person, autistic, ADHD. I want to make sure that I say that because neurodivergent also includes other things. All right, take care, bye.